My name is Madison Clark and I'm 28 years old. Last Tuesday, I discovered my parents had been secretly paying my landlord for 3 months to orchestrate my eviction planning, to hand my apartment keys to my younger sister Emma, their golden child who just landed a job in the city. The betrayal cut deeper than any romantic heartbreak I'd ever experienced. What started as a simple phone call to negotiate my lease became the unraveling of everything I believed about family, loyalty, and unconditional love. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family drama that completely changed my life, I'm curious. Where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a story that'll make you question everything about sibling rivalry and parental favoritism, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this tale of family vengeance is just getting started. Trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I was always the responsible one. While Emma spent her teenage years partying and barely scraping through high school, I was working part-time jobs, maintaining a 4 gigapascals and saving every penny for college. My parents Robert and Linda Clark constantly reminded me that as the older sister I needed to set an example. Madison, you know Emma looks up to you, became their favorite phrase whenever I complained about the obvious double standards. After graduating with a degree in marketing from Northwestern, I moved to downtown Chicago and found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. The rent was steep, $2,200 a month. But I'd been working as a digital marketing coordinator for a tech startup, and I was proud to afford it on my own. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, was an elderly man who seemed to appreciate having a quiet, reliable tenant. I never missed a payment, never caused problems, and even helped him set up online rent collection. Emma, meanwhile, had spent the last 5 years bouncing between community colleges, part-time jobs at trendy boutiques, and living rent-free in our childhood bedroom. My parents funded her lifestyle without question. When she finally decided to pursue a career as a social media influencer, they bought her professional photography equipment, paid for her wardrobe, and even hired a photographer for her Instagram shoots. The dynamic became crystal clear during family dinners. Emma would regale everyone with stories about her latest brand collaboration or sponsored post, while my actual career achievements, successful campaigns, client acquisitions, promotions, were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. That's nice, honey, but did you see Emma's post about that skincare brand? She got 5,000 likes, Mom would gush. I told myself it didn't matter. I was building my independence, my career, my life. Let them baby Emma. I was proving I could succeed without their financial support or validation. Looking back, I realize how naive that was. I thought my independence protected me from their manipulation, but it actually made me the perfect target. The first sign something was wrong came in early March. I'd been living in my apartment for almost 3 years, and my lease was up for renewal. Mr. Peterson, who had always been accommodating about lease terms, suddenly became evasive when I tried to discuss renewal. "We'll figure something out," he kept saying, avoiding specifics about rent increases or lease duration. Then Emma announced she'd landed a dream job with a marketing agency downtown. Suddenly, she needed to move to the city immediately. "It's so expensive though," she complained during our family dinner. "All the good apartments are like $2,000 a month. How do people even afford that?" Mom and Dad exchanged what I now recognize as a meaningful look. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Dad said. "We'll help you figure out something perfect." I should have seen it coming, but I was genuinely happy for Emma. Despite everything, she was still my little sister, and I wanted her to succeed. I even offered to help her apartment hunt, suggesting she look in neighborhoods with better value than Lincoln Park. "Oh, I don't know," she said with a strange smile. "I have my eye on a specific place. It might work out better than you think." That comment should have been a red flag, but I was dealing with my own stress about my lease situation. Mr. Peterson had finally called me back and scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday to discuss my housing situation. His formal tone was completely different from our usual friendly interactions, and a cold feeling settled in my stomach. I spent the weekend researching backup apartments and calculating how much I could afford if my rent increased significantly. I'd been planning to ask for a promotion at work anyway, so maybe this was just motivation to accelerate that timeline. I had no idea that while I was preparing for a normal landlord negotiation, my entire family was orchestrating my downfall. Tuesday morning arrived with typical Chicago spring weather. Unpredictable and cold. I dressed professionally for my meeting with Mr. Peterson, bringing copies of my payment history, reference letters from work, and even a character reference from my college advisor. I was prepared to negotiate, maybe accept a reasonable rent increase, and secure my housing for another year. Mr. Peterson's office was in the basement of our building, a cramped space that smelled like coffee and old paper. He seemed uncomfortable when I knocked, avoiding eye contact as he gestured for me to sit in the rickety chair across from his desk. "Madison," he began, then stopped shuffling papers unnecessarily. This is a difficult conversation." I leaned forward, concerned. "Is everything okay, Mr. Peterson? Are you selling the building?" He shook his head, then pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Your lease expires at the end of this month and I won't be renewing it." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? But why? I've been a perfect tenant. I've never been late on rent, never caused problems. "It's not about your behavior," he interrupted, still not meeting my eyes. "It's a business decision. The unit will be going to someone else." I stared at him, trying to process this information. Someone else? But I have tenant rights. You can't just arbitrarily decide not to renew without cause. That's when he looked up and I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. Guilt. He looked guilty. "Actually," he said slowly, "there have been some complaints." Complaints. What complaints? From who? He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Noise complaints. Multiple reports of loud parties, music at all hours disrupting other tenants. I stared at the papers in disbelief. That's impossible. I work 50 hours a week and spend most evenings reading or watching Netflix. I don't even own a sound system. "The complaints are documented," he said, tapping the papers. "And there's also the matter of unauthorized occupancy." Unauthorized occupancy? I live alone. According to these reports, you've had someone staying overnight multiple times a week for months. My mind reeled. Nothing he was saying made sense. Then a terrible thought began to form. Who filed these complaints, Mr. Peterson? Hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw the truth. "I can't reveal that information." "You can't reveal it or you won't." I stood up, my voice rising. "Mr. Peterson, I've lived here for 3 years. You know me. You know these complaints are false." He couldn't look at me. "I'm sorry, Madison. The decision has been made. You have until the end of the month." I left his office in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. The complaints were obviously fabricated, but by who and why? As I rode the elevator back to my apartment, a horrible suspicion began to take shape. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the eviction. I needed their support, maybe help finding a new place quickly. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice strangely cheerful. "Oh no, honey, that's terrible," she said, but her tone didn't match her words. "What will you do?" "I don't know. I have 3 weeks to find a new place. The market is so competitive right now." "Well, you could always move back home temporarily," she suggested, "while you look for something new." The offer felt wrong somehow. My parents had been pushing for independence since I was 18, and now they were suggesting I move backward. "Actually," Mom continued, "funny coincidence. Emma was just telling us about this apartment she found. In Lincoln Park, I think, 1 bedroom, really reasonable rent." My stomach dropped. Lincoln Park, that's my neighborhood. Is it? Well, she's very excited about it. Says it's perfect for her new job. I hung up feeling sick. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I couldn't quite believe what I was thinking. My own parents wouldn't sabotage me for Emma's benefit. Would they? The next morning I decided to do some investigating. I started by calling the building management company listed on my lease. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone who could access complaint records. "I'm calling about noise and occupancy complaints filed against apartment 4B, I said. "Let me check. Yes, I see several complaints filed over the past 2 months. All from the same source. Can you tell me who filed them?" "I can't give you specific names, but I can tell you they came from someone claiming to be a concerned neighbor who visits the building frequently." A concerned neighbor who visits frequently. Not another tenant. Someone who had regular access to the building and knowledge of my habits. Someone who knew exactly when I was home and when I wasn't. That afternoon, I positioned myself in the lobby with a book, pretending to read, while actually watching for anyone suspicious. After 2 hours, I was about to give up when I saw a familiar figure walking confidently toward the elevator. Emma. She had a key. My hands shook as I watched Emma stride through the lobby like she owned the place. She wasn't visiting. She was conducting surveillance. Every terrible suspicion I'd harbored suddenly crystallized into horrifying clarity. My little sister, the family favorite who could do no wrong, was actively destroying my life with our parents' blessing. I waited until she was gone, then immediately called Mr. Peterson. "I need to know who's been coming and going from my building, specifically who might have access to keys, or who's been making complaints about my unit." "Madison, I can't discuss other tenants. I'm not asking about other tenants. I'm asking about someone who's been impersonating complaints against me." There was a long pause. "If you have evidence of false complaints, you should submit it in writing." "What if I told you the person filing complaints is related to the person you're planning to rent my apartment to?" Another pause, longer this time. "I think we should end this conversation. Mr. Peterson, please. Just tell me. Did my parents contact you about this apartment?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he said quietly, "Your family made a very generous offer for the unit." "I'm sorry, Madison. I need the money." The line went dead. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. My parents hadn't just enabled Emma's sabotage, they had orchestrated it. They had paid my landlord to evict me so their precious younger daughter could have my apartment. I needed proof. Real concrete evidence that would expose their scheme and give me legal recourse. I started documenting everything, screenshotting my perfect payment history, photographing my lease agreement, recording my conversations with Mr. Peterson. But I needed more. That's when I remembered my building security cameras. Every major entrance and the lobby were monitored. If Emma had been coming and going regularly, making fake complaints and gathering information for her false reports, there would be video evidence. The building's management company was initially resistant, but when I mentioned potential fraud and false police reports, they agreed to let me review footage with their security coordinator. We spent 3 hours going through recordings from the past 2 months, and what we found was damning. Emma had been visiting my building an average of 3 times per week, always during hours when she knew I'd be at work. The timestamps on her visits perfectly aligned with the complaint dates. She would enter using a key, spend 30 to 45 minutes inside, clearly in my apartment, then leave and immediately call the building management office. But the most damaging evidence came from my building's guest log. Every visitor is supposed to sign in, but Emma had been bypassing this requirement because she had her own key. When I cross-referenced her unauthorized visits with my credit card statements, I found charges on those same days at nearby coffee shops and restaurants. She was making a day trip out of setting up my downfall. Armed with this evidence, I scheduled a meeting with a tenant rights attorney. Sarah Martinez was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in landlord-tenant disputes and fraud cases. "This is one of the most elaborate tenant fraud schemes I've ever seen," she said, reviewing my documentation. "Your family essentially conspired to commit housing fraud. The false complaints, the bribery of the landlord, the unauthorized access to your unit. Any one of these would be grounds for legal action. What are my options? Multiple avenues. We can sue your landlord for breach of contract and discrimination. We can pursue criminal charges against your sister for filing false reports and trespassing. And we can go after your parents for conspiracy to commit fraud. The idea of taking legal action against my family felt surreal, but Sarah's next words solidified my resolve. Madison, this isn't just about an apartment. This is about someone deliberately destroying your housing stability, your financial security, and your peace of mind. If they've done this once, they'll do it again. You need to send a clear message that this behavior has consequences. I left Sarah's office with a plan. We would demand full documentation from Mr. Peterson about the payments he'd received and any communications with my family. We would file complaints with the City Housing Authority about the fraudulent eviction, and we would prepare both civil and criminal cases. But first, I wanted my family to have one chance to come clean. I decided to attend Sunday dinner as usual and see if anyone would tell me the truth. That Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house in Winnetka with a recording app running on my phone. The scene was sickeningly normal. Mom bustling around the kitchen, Dad watching golf, Emma scrolling through Instagram while complaining about how hard it was to find good lighting for her photos in the city. So, Emma said casually, I finally found the perfect apartment. You'll never guess where. I took a sip of wine and waited. Lincoln Park. It's this amazing one-bedroom with hardwood floors and huge windows. The landlord is so nice. He's giving me such a good deal on rent. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom beamed. When do you move in? Next month. I can't wait to be close to work and all the good restaurants. I looked around the table at my family. My parents smiling proudly at Emma. Emma glowing with excitement about her good fortune. Everyone acting like this was a completely normal conversation. Emma, I said carefully, what's the address of this apartment? She paused for just a moment. Oh, it's on Fullerton. You probably don't know the building. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of my building's exterior. This building, the color drained from her face. Mom and Dad suddenly became very interested in their dinner plates. That's my building, Emma. That's my apartment. And that's when I knew for certain my family hadn't just betrayed me. They had declared war. If you've stuck with me this far, you're probably as shocked as I was. But trust me, this story is just getting to the good part. Sometimes when family turns against you, the only option is to fight back harder than they ever expected. Keep watching to see how I made sure their perfect plan backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The silence at that dinner table was deafening. Emma stared at me with wide eyes, finally understanding that her secret was out. Mom busied herself collecting plates that were still full of food, and Dad suddenly found his golf game fascinating again. I can explain, Emma finally whispered. Please do, I said, my voice eerily calm. Explain how you got keys to my building. Explain the noise complaints filed under a fake name. Explain how you knew exactly when my lease was up for renewal. Madison, honey, Mom interrupted. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mom. I have security footage of Emma entering my building dozens of times. I have documentation of the payments you made to my landlord. I know everything. Dad finally looked up from his golf. We were trying to help both of you girls. Emma needed a place in the city, and we thought maybe it was time for you to come home for a while, save some money, by destroying my housing stability, by filing false police reports, by bribing my landlord to evict me. My voice was rising, despite my attempts to stay calm. We didn't think you'd be this upset, Emma said, tears starting to form. You're so successful and independent. We figured you'd just find another place. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a slap. They had calculated that my competence would be my downfall. That because I was responsible and capable, I deserved to suffer the consequences of their selfishness. I stood up, grabbing my purse. You're right about one thing. I am independent. Independent enough to handle this situation without your help. Madison, wait, Mom called after me. Don't. Just don't. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I drove home through downtown Chicago, my mind racing with plans. Sarah Martinez had given me the legal roadmap, but I realized I needed more than just lawyers. I needed to expose them completely to ensure that their perfect suburban reputation suffered the same devastation they'd inflicted on me. That night, I started building my case methodically. First, I contacted every family friend, relative, and family business associate I could think of. I didn't tell them the whole story yet, just asked casual questions about their opinions on family loyalty, housing fraud, and what they thought constituted acceptable behavior between siblings. The responses were illuminating. Aunt Carol, Dad's sister, mentioned how proud she was that both Robert and Linda's daughters were so independent and successful. Uncle Mike, Mom's brother, talked about how important it was for parents to treat their children fairly. Family friend Mrs. Patterson gushed about what wonderful parents mine were, and how lucky Emma and I were to have such support. They had crafted a perfect public image, and everyone believed it. That made my next move even more satisfying. I started with social media. Emma's Instagram account was public, filled with photos of her curated lifestyle and humble brags about her new apartment. I screenshotted every post where she mentioned her amazing new place and incredible luck finding affordable housing in Lincoln Park. Then, I created a detailed timeline. Using her social media posts, the security footage timestamps, and my documentation of the fraudulent complaints, I could prove exactly when each step of their plan had been executed. Emma had been posting about apartment hunting while simultaneously sabotaging my lease. She'd been building excitement about her dream apartment while filing false noise complaints against me. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. While going through my email for any communications with Mr. Peterson, I found something I'd completely forgotten about. 3 months ago, Emma had asked me to help her update her LinkedIn profile. I'd logged into her account from my computer to help with the professional writing, and my browser had saved her login credentials. I stared at the screen cursor hovering over her LinkedIn bookmark. This was probably illegal, definitely unethical, and absolutely necessary. Her LinkedIn messages told the whole story. She had been in communication with my landlord since January, asking about upcoming vacancies in my specific building. She'd researched tenant eviction procedures and even joined online groups about helping family members transition housing situations. Most damning of all, she'd messaged with someone from her new job about family connections, helping with housing, and how sometimes you have to be creative about getting what you need. I screenshotted everything, then changed her password so she couldn't delete the evidence. I felt a small twinge of guilt, but it disappeared when I remembered her standing in my lobby with those keys plotting my eviction. The next day, I met with Sarah Martinez again, this time bringing printed copies of everything I'd found. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the LinkedIn messages. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, documented in writing. Your sister essentially confessed to intentional housing fraud and family manipulation. What's our strongest legal avenue? Multiple angles. Housing, discrimination, fraud, conspiracy filing, false police reports, harassment. But Madison, I think our best strategy might be to approach this as a comprehensive fraud case that involves all 3 family members. She pulled out a legal pad and started outlining our approach. We demand full restitution. Your moving costs, temporary housing expenses, legal fees, and damages for emotional distress. We file complaints with the City Housing Authority, which could result in fines for your landlord and potentially criminal charges for your family. And we pursue a civil case for the full scope of damages. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate, $50,000 in damages and expenses. More if we include punitive damages for the intentional nature of the fraud. That number made my heart race. My family had gambled my housing stability for Emma's convenience, thinking I'd quietly accept their manipulation. Now they were looking at significant financial consequences and potential criminal charges. There's one more thing, Sarah said. Given the documented pattern of favoritism and financial manipulation, we might also explore filing for a restraining order to prevent further harassment. As I left Sarah's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: power. For years, I'd been the responsible one, the accommodating one, the one who absorbed my family's dysfunction without complaint. Now I had the tools to fight back, and I intended to use every single one. My phone rang as I was walking to my car. Emma's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful message about how sorry she was and how we needed to work this out as a family. Too late for that, Emma. You taught me that family loyalty is conditional, that fairness is negotiable, and that some people will destroy you for their own convenience. Now you're going to learn that actions have consequences, and sometimes karma comes with interest. I had one more stop to make before executing my plan. The Chicago Tribune's local news desk was always looking for stories about housing fraud and family manipulation, especially ones involving affluent suburban families who thought they were above consequences. Time to make sure this story got the attention it deserved. The Chicago Tribune office buzzed with typical newsroom energy. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, reporters hunched over desks chasing deadlines. I'd called ahead and scheduled a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, an investigative reporter who specialized in housing fraud and white-collar crime stories. Tell me about your situation, Jennifer said, pulling out a notebook as we sat in the busy coffee area adjacent to the newsroom. I laid out the entire story, methodically. The mysterious lease non-renewal, the fabricated complaints, the security footage, the family conspiracy. Jennifer's eyebrows rose higher with each detail. Do you have documentation for all of this? I opened my laptop and showed her everything. The timestamps, the fraudulent complaints, Emma's LinkedIn confessions, the payment records from my parents to Mr. Peterson. Jennifer whistled softly as she scrolled through the evidence. This is incredible. A middle-class suburban family orchestrating housing fraud against their own daughter for sibling favoritism. Our readers are going to eat this up. I want them exposed, I said. They thought they could manipulate the situation quietly, that I'd just accept their betrayal and move on. They need to understand that their actions have public consequences. What about your relationship with your family? This story will essentially destroy any chance of reconciliation. I thought about Emma standing in my building lobby with those keys, about my parents' casual dismissal of my housing stability, about the years of accepting their double standards and emotional manipulation. They destroyed our relationship when they chose Emma's convenience over my basic housing security. I'm just making sure the destruction is mutual. Jennifer grinned. It was the smile of a reporter who'd stumbled onto a perfect story. When can you go on record? I'd like to publish this by Friday. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to file the official complaints. After that, I'm completely on record. That evening, I prepared for the final confrontation. Emma had called 6 times and sent a dozen text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. My parents had left voicemails demanding I stop being dramatic and come home to discuss this like adults. I ignored them all. They'd had months to treat this situation like adults and they'd chosen manipulation instead. Wednesday morning, Sarah and I walked into the Cook County Housing Court to file our comprehensive fraud complaint. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed the mountain of evidence we submitted. I've never seen a family housing fraud case this well documented, she said. Is that good or bad? I asked. For you, very good. For them, this is going to be expensive. We filed complaints with the Chicago Housing Authority, the Illinois Attorney General's office, and the local police department. By noon, my family was facing potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and regulatory investigations. Then, my phone exploded. Apparently, word had leaked about the story. Jennifer Walsh had called my parents for comment, and they'd panicked. Mom called first, screaming about how I was destroying the family and humiliating them in public. Dad left a voicemail threatening to disown me if I didn't stop this nonsense immediately. Emma sent a text that simply said, "I hate you." I screenshotted everything. Sarah had warned me they might escalate their harassment once they realized the scope of the consequences, and she wanted documentation of any threatening or intimidating behavior. The Tribune story went live Thursday morning with the headline, "Suburban Parents Allegedly Bribed Landlord to Evict Daughter Gift Apartment to Younger Sister." Jennifer had done her job perfectly, presenting the facts objectively while letting the sheer audacity of their behavior speak for itself. The story went viral. By Thursday afternoon, Emma's Instagram was flooded with comments. Someone had found her social media accounts and connected them to the Tribune story. Her carefully curated influencer image was crumbling under an avalanche of criticism about entitled behavior and family manipulation. My parents' social media accounts were similarly overwhelmed. Dad's LinkedIn profile, which had always featured photos of our close-knit family and posts about raising successful daughters, was now attracting commentary about parental favoritism and ethical failures. But the real impact came from their social circle. By Thursday evening, I was receiving calls and messages from extended family members, family friends, and my parents' business associates who had read the story and were horrified. Aunt Carol called me directly. "Madison, I had no idea. Your mother always made it sound like you and Emma were both thriving independently." Uncle Mike sent a long email expressing his disgust with his sister's behavior and offering to help with my legal expenses. Mrs. Patterson, the family friend who had gushed about my parents' parenting skills, left a voicemail saying she was appalled and couldn't believe people she'd known for 20 years could be so manipulative. The social consequences were swift and brutal. Dad's accounting firm started receiving calls from clients who'd read the story. Mom's book club asked her to take a temporary break from meetings. Emma's influencer sponsors began quietly dropping their contracts. By Friday afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Mr. Peterson. "Madison, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me at my office?" I arrived with Sarah, unsure what to expect. Mr. Peterson looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I want to make this right," he said without preamble. "I never should have accepted money from your parents." I was desperate. My wife's medical bills, the building maintenance costs. But that's no excuse. He pulled out a folder. "I'm prepared to offer you a new lease, same terms as your original agreement. Plus, I'll waive your security deposit and first month's rent as compensation for the distress." Sarah reviewed the paperwork. "What about Emma's lease voided?" "I'm returning your parents' money and telling them the deal is off." He looked at me directly. "I'm also prepared to provide a full written statement about their bribery attempt and Emma's fraudulent complaints for your legal case." I stared at him. Why now? Because I read the Tribune story and I realized I wasn't just helping one tenant over another, I was enabling a family to abuse their own daughter. That's not who I want to be. As we left Mr. Peterson's office, Sarah was grinning. "That statement from your landlord just made your case slam dunk. With his testimony about the bribery plus all your documentation, your parents are looking at serious financial consequences." "How serious?" "Between the criminal fines, civil damages, and legal fees. Probably close to $100,000. That evening I sat in my apartment secure for another year, and reflected on the week's events. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from my family, but I'd stopped answering. There would be time for conversations later, after the legal proceedings were complete, and they fully understood the consequences of their actions. Emma's latest text had simply said, "Please call me, I'm losing everything." I typed back, "Now you know how it feels to have your stability destroyed by family." Then I blocked her number. My parents would face the full legal consequences of their fraud. Emma would deal with the professional and social consequences of her manipulation. and I would rebuild my life with the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will betray you for their own convenience. When that happens, you have two choices: accept the betrayal or fight back with everything you've got. I chose to fight. And I won. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my beautifully decorated Lincoln Park apartment watching the Chicago skyline light up as the sun sets. The same apartment my family tried to steal from me is now officially mine with a 5-year lease, thanks to Mr. Peterson's guilt and my lawyer's negotiation skills. But the real victory isn't just keeping my home. It's the complete transformation of my family dynamics and the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to protect yourself from most. Fiercely. The legal proceedings concluded last month, with results that exceeded even Sarah's optimistic predictions. My parents faced criminal charges for housing fraud and conspiracy, ultimately accepting a plea deal that included $45, 0 inches restitution to me, 200 hours of community service, and 2 years of probation. Emma was charged separately for filing false police reports and fraudulent complaints, receiving a $15,000 fine and her own community service requirement. But the criminal case was just the beginning. The civil lawsuit revealed even more disturbing details about their planning. During depositions, we discovered they had been discussing the Madison problem for over a year. My success and independence had become an embarrassment to them. Proof that their favoritism toward Emma was creating an unflattering contrast between their daughters. Text messages between my parents recovered during discovery showed they viewed me as too comfortable and needed to be brought down a peg. They genuinely believed that destroying my housing stability would force me to become more dependent on them, making me grateful for their support and less likely to highlight Emma's failures by comparison. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. They hadn't just wanted to give Emma my apartment. They wanted to break my spirit and force me back under their control. The financial consequences extended far beyond the legal penalties. Dad's accounting firm lost several major clients after the Tribune story, costing him an estimated $200, 0 inches annual revenue. Mom's interior design consulting business effectively collapsed when her wealthy North Shore clientele decided they couldn't trust someone who would manipulate their own family. Emma's influencer career imploded completely. The story had exposed her privileged background and willingness to destroy her sister for personal gain, making her toxic to brands trying to maintain positive public images. Her follower count dropped from 85000 to fewer than 12000, and the remaining followers seemed to stick around, primarily to leave negative comments. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was social. Their carefully constructed image as the perfect suburban family was completely shattered. Friends, neighbors, business associates, and extended family members all knew the truth about their character. They had traded their reputation for a temporary advantage that ultimately gained them nothing. The broader family dynamics shifted dramatically in my favor. Aunt Carol publicly supported me, even offering to help with legal expenses. Uncle Mike cut off contact with my parents entirely, saying he couldn't respect people who would cannibalize their own children. Family friends who had known us for decades reached out to express their support and disgust with my parents' behavior. Emma tried to reconcile 3 months ago, showing up at my apartment building unannounced with tears and apologies. Through my building's intercom system, she begged for forgiveness, claiming she hadn't understood how serious the consequences would be, and that our parents had pressured her into the scheme. I listened to her sobbing explanation, then said calmly, "Emma, you taught me that family love is conditional and that you'll destroy me whenever it's convenient. I learned that lesson perfectly. Now leave and don't come back." I haven't heard from her since. My parents made several attempts at reconciliation, including showing up at my workplace and hiring a family counselor who called me asking for a mediation session. I declined all contact. Sarah had advised me that any communication could be seen as willingness to negotiate reduced restitution payments, and I wanted every penny they owed me. More importantly, I recognized that their attempts at reconciliation weren't based on genuine remorse, but on their desire to minimize consequences. True remorse would have meant accepting responsibility without expecting forgiveness. Instead, they wanted me to help them rebuild the family image they had destroyed through their own choices. The experience fundamentally changed how I approach relationships and boundaries. I learned that being the responsible one had made me a target for manipulation because my family assumed I would absorb their dysfunction without fighting back. I learned that some people will exploit your love for them as a weakness, using your desire to maintain relationships as leverage to treat you poorly. Most importantly, I learned that cutting off toxic family members isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. The guilt I initially felt about destroying family relationships evaporated when I realized they had already destroyed those relationships through their own actions. I simply made the destruction visible and ensured there were consequences. My career has flourished without the constant undercurrent of family drama and manipulation. I received a promotion 6 months ago, partly because my newfound confidence and boundary-setting skills impressed my management team. My social life has expanded as I've built friendships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. I started dating someone wonderful 3 months ago, a fellow marketing professional who was amazed when I told him this story. "Your family created a villain arc," he said, "but you're definitely the hero." The Tribune story has had lasting impact beyond my personal situation. Jennifer Walsh tells me it's been shared widely in housing advocacy groups and family therapy circles as an example of how financial manipulation can escalate to criminal behavior. Several people have reached out to share similar stories of family financial abuse, and I've been able to connect them with resources for legal help. Looking back, I realize this experience was terrible but necessary. For years, I had accepted my family's dysfunction because I thought maintaining relationships required absorbing mistreatment. I thought being the bigger person meant allowing others to be smaller. I thought family loyalty was a one-way obligation where I owed them forgiveness regardless of their behavior. Now, I understand that healthy relationships require mutual respect, that loyalty must be reciprocal, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is impose consequences for harmful behavior. My parents needed to learn that their actions had results beyond their immediate family bubble. Emma needed to understand that charm and tears couldn't undo the damage caused by calculated cruelty. The money from the restitution payments allowed me to completely renovate my apartment and build a substantial emergency fund. But the real value was proving to myself that I could fight back effectively when attacked, that I didn't have to accept mistreatment for the sake of family peace, and that I was strong enough to rebuild my life entirely on my own terms. Now, as I watch the Chicago sunset from my secure, beautiful home, I feel something I haven't experienced in years: complete peace. No family drama, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells around people who claim to love me while actively working to undermine my happiness. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Sometimes the people closest to us teach us the hardest lessons about boundaries and consequences. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced family betrayal, and how did you handle it? Did you choose forgiveness or justice? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for separai, more real-life drama and justice stories. Share this video with anyone who's struggling with toxic family dynamics. Sometimes, we all need reminding that we don't have to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family vengeance and personal empowerment. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is living well, building boundaries, and refusing to let anyone, even family, treat you as less than you deserve. Life's too short to accept betrayal from people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. Until next time, keep fighting for yourself. You're worth it.